Hey guys, this is MFHL TV. Today we're going to be talking about setting up a Dynasty Hockey League. Now, Dynasty Hockey Leagues are the most fun. They are the best type of pool in my opinion because they are a long-term goal. You are not just looking for this year, you are talking about setting up a team that's going to be a dynasty for years to come in your Dynasty League. That being said, our rules are not 100% Dynasty. It has some keeper league elements in there, but for the most part, it's a Dynasty League. And I'm going to tell you how to set up the best kind of Dynasty League to make it user-friendly, to make it fun for everyone. And we've been doing the MFHL for over 15 years and we are still going strong. One of the reasons is because we have adapted and simplified the rules and simplified the management to make it user-friendly. And we're going to show you how to do that too, so you can set up a Dynasty League and you're going to have a Dynasty League that lasts longer than 15 years too. You're going to see. All right, so stay tuned. We have a lot of great tips for you. Tip number 1, use Fantrax Premium. Just pay the fee, pay that $100. Fantrax Premium is the best site. We've tried Fantrax Regular, it didn't have everything we needed. We tried Yahoo, not good enough, it didn't have all the prospects. We tried ESPN, at the time they didn't have a draft, so Fantrax Premium is really the best. And what are you gonna do? Well, I would charge the $100 fee to the winner. That way the winner pays that $100, but he doesn't care, he already won $700. And the losers of the pool, well, they feel good that they didn't actually have to pay the $100 for the Fantrax Premium. We do head-to-head weekly matchups. We have a 20-man weekly roster that we set up, and we run that every week. You can change your lineup every week. That being said, we do have a mini playoff pool. The top 8 teams make the playoffs, and we actually use pickuphockey.com for that because that is just a straight-up points playoff pool, whereas our normal Fantrax pool is a head-to-head season. Step 2, we have a salary cap that is slightly higher than real life. That's because we're only 14 teams. And if you have a 14-team league, you're going to have better players than the 31 NHL teams. So I would modify your salary cap depending on how many teams you are. And you have to reflect the number of teams because if you only have 14 teams, maybe you want to use $92 million salary cap because your players are going to be slightly better than the players on the 31 NHL teams. That's the way we do it in the MFHL. We have 14 teams and we use $92 million salary cap. Point number 3. We have a farm team, and this farm team has a cutoff salary of $3.75 million. What that means is guys in your farm team don't have to be starting every week. They can go up to the pro roster, they can go down to the farm, but there's a cutoff of $3.7 million. We have 20 guys in the starting lineup, and our farm team is 24 men. You have guys that make $3.75 million that are extremely valuable in our league because they have that ability to go up and down, whereas a guy making $4 million has to be played every week. He has to be in your pro roster weekly team, and you cannot scratch him. So that makes it a little riskier if you are drafting a guy or signing a guy who makes $6 million and you know you have to play him when you're not sure whether or not he's going to be worth it. Well, what happens if you have a $6 million goalie who is not even starting and that's a disaster and you have to dress him? Well, I'm going to talk about that. The prospect bank. We have a 20-man prospect bank. You never have to call a guy up until you want to. There's no rush, but like a toothpaste tube, you can never put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once you call a guy up from the prospect bank, you can never put him back in the prospect bank. Now, who's in the prospect bank? Well, these are guys that are not making an impact on your team right now, but maybe in the next few years they will be. They're mostly guys from the last few drafts, but also maybe some European guys that haven't come over yet, and guys that you are in no rush to call. Point number 5. You own your players until they turn 30. This is where we kind of bridge a dynasty and a keeper league in the way that we don't own players forever. Once they turn 30, they go back into our draft. And they can be drafted again, but as one-year rentals because they're already over 30. That being said, each team in the MFHL keeps one over 30 guy. They're generally maybe starting goalies who have been really productive over the last few years, and also some top-tier superstars like Crosby and Ovechkin and Kane. Those guys are kept year after year as keepers, and the best goalies are usually kept year after year too. But after a while, some of those goalies see themselves being put back into the draft. Like this year, Ben Bishop went back into the draft for the first time when he was usually one of our franchise players. Point number 6, signing guys mid-year. We have a couple of rules for this. We have 2 UFA picks at the beginning of the year and 2 UFA mid-season picks. Mind you, these guys are mostly just leftover players because most of the productive players belong to somebody already. We have deep teams. We have 20 starting lineup, 24 farm team, and a 20-man prospect bank. That is 64 players times 14 teams. Pretty much anyone who's anyone already belongs to someone. But there are some leftovers. Sometimes it's guys that just seem to be making too much money and didn't seem worth it, but it turns out they're having a productive year and then suddenly they're worth it. Sometimes there are young guys who didn't look like they were going to make the team, and then suddenly they did, and they weren't owned by anyone because they weren't a real blue chip prospect. Now, if that player is a rookie, he is ineligible to be signed in our league. The best example of this for us was John Marino. John Marino was unowned by anyone last year, and we could not sign him because he was a rookie. To be signed, you have to have played a game last year. So we cannot sign rookies the year of our league. They have to already have played a game the year before. Point number 7, the draft. Our MFHL draft is really exciting because it includes all kinds of different players. It includes the standard 2020 entry draft NHL guys, but it also includes maybe second and third rounders from the last few drafts. These are guys that didn't seem like they had enough value to be drafted last year, but have suddenly seen an increase in their stock. The best example for us would be Nick Robertson, a second rounder last year. He was unowned, but this year he actually took a lot of value and was a first round pick in our draft this year. I think he went around 10th overall. The second type of player are last year's unowned rookies. As I mentioned, John Marino was the best example of that this year. He went also in the top 10 of our draft because he was an unowned rookie. He was ineligible to be signed. So there's the second type of player who can be signed who can be drafted in our draft. The third type of player is the 30-year-old UFA. In our case, Frederik Andersen was the first 30-year-old drafted in our league. He went about 12th overall. He was a goalie who's going to get you wins, but when you're drafting him, you're thinking, do I want this goalie who's going to get me a lot of wins, or do I want the real life, maybe 10th overall? Do I want a guy like Cole Perfetti, or do I want Frederik Andersen for 1 year? And in this case, the GM said Frederik Andersen. Lastly, there are some mid-range 26-ish-year-old guys who were previously unowned, who fit into the example of draftees in the MFHL draft. A good example of this was Mikhail Grigorenko. He was a guy who was in Europe and was unowned because he was there for so long. The GM gave up on him, and now he comes back as a mid-20s guy, and he will be owned by our GM for 5 years or so if he wants. He's eligible until he's 30 years old. These types of guys also include grinders that maybe are not glamorous, so they're not the kinds of guys who are always drafted, but they get you hits and they get you blocks. None of those guys went in the first round this year. The 8th point. In our off-season, you can drop anyone you want. And once the season starts, you cannot drop anyone anymore. So drop your guys during the year. Now, this actually caused a little bit of problems for us, so we came up with 2 drops. Now, these extra drops are, one is for a goalie, because if you have a $6 million goalie that you are forced to dress, that becomes real ugly real fast. So we made 1 goalie drop. This is for a goalie who's making over $3.75 million and he has to go in your lineup. This is a guy like Henrik Lundqvist, who last year was relegated to the bench even though he was making a lot of money and he was not getting any starts. So that type of guy can be cut. You get 1. If you somehow have 2 goalies making $6 million that lost their starting jobs, Well, you're going to have to find someone else to trade for him, and then that guy can buy him out, because there is no other way to drop a goalie, to drop a $6 million backup. The second one is what we call an AHL drop. This is reserved, it's supposed to be reserved at least, for a guy like Carl Alsner, who is making more than $4 million, but was sent down to the AHL. Under normal circumstances, a guy making more than $4 million had to be in your lineup, your pro lineup. But because of this extra drop, for AHL players making a lot of money, you could drop Alsner. We decided to go with 2 drops instead of buying out contracts. Why? Well, we tried buying out contracts before, but that creates a lot of work for the commissioner or the guy in charge of the salaries, and you always have to think, who is going to be in charge of doing these salary cap penalties? Who's going to be in charge of calculating all this? Who's going to be in charge of making sure that your $92 million cap is actually $90 million because you owe $2 million? If you have to ask the question, who is going to do this extra work? Well, and it's not you, well, you got to think of a solution. So for us, this was the best solution. Those were 8 tips we have for setting up a great Dynasty Hockey League. These are the rules that we use in the MFHL, and it runs pretty smoothly, and I guarantee if you use these 8 rules, you're going to set up a user-friendly Dynasty Hockey League just like the MFHL. Thank you. Bye.